Coming up on DC News Now at 4, a new regime taking command of the Washington football franchise. Hear from the man tasked with turning the troubled team around. Plus, the superintendent saga continues for Montgomery County Schools, a council member telling us what he wants to see going forward.
Sunny skies are here to stay, but we'll let you know when our temperatures will also start to warm up with that sunshine.
Then DC News Now is honoring Black history. Following her historic appointment, find out how DC's chief of police is settling into her new role with her work cut out for her. And this week's DMV doer is helping cancer patients in the community find some peace during their battles.
You're watching the station covering all of the DMV. This is DC News Now.
And thanks for joining us on this Monday for DC News Now at 4. I'm Mark Hall.
And I'm Elisa Gale. We start with sports. The Washington Commanders' newly hired head coach, Dan Quinn, has been officially welcomed in Ashburn, Virginia.
And before we head out live to Ashburn, we've got our Alex Flum in studio with the reaction from Quinn's press conference. And Alex, what were some of the key takeaways from the Commanders' new head coach?
Yeah, Mark and Annalisa, this is a big day for this Washington franchise. Obviously, in the past year, we've had a new owner, a new general manager, now a new head coach. And that new head coach is Dan Quinn. Let's talk a little bit about how we got here first, right before we get to the presser. Dan Quinn, hired this week as the Commanders head coach. Previously, he was the Dallas Cowboys defensive coordinator just before this. Before that, he was the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, took the Falcons all the way to the Super Bowl. You may remember some really good defenses for the Seattle Seahawks back in the day. He was their defensive coordinator when they were the Legion of Boom. So now Quinn will be tasked with turning Washington into a winner, something that it hasn't been for a lot of years. And today, he talked about his vision for what he can do. He's not calling this a rebuild, but he's saying this will be a recalibration in Washington.
We're going to compete our asses off together. And so knowing that, I hope they feel the energy that's and momentum that's going to come from this day forward. And knowing that years ago, I can remember Matt Ryan, after my first year together, he said, I felt like I got traded, but I went back to the same building. And I thought to myself, good job, because that's what I was wanting them to feel. They needed a recalibration, and our club does too. And so that's what I anticipate doing.
Another thing Quinn said is that he wants to look back 20 years from now and know that this was a big day that led to them being a winner. And we do have boots on the ground. Jake Rom currently standing by in Ashburn right now. And Jake, I mentioned that he was with the Falcons before he got to the Super Bowl, but he couldn't win the Super Bowl. Sounds like Quinn says he wants to get there and win it this time with the Commanders.
Yeah, Alex, the press conference, it took an hour to get Dan Quinn off that podium alongside his GM Adam Peters and obviously majority owner Josh Harrison. You kind of hit it on the nail there about his first stint with Atlanta, obviously making it all the way to the Super Bowl. Everybody remembering it, obviously, for that 28-3 blown lead against the New England Patriots, the biggest comeback in Super Bowl history, obviously. But Dan Quinn, obviously, now here in Washington, and he talked about it in his presser about his second chance at being a successful head coach.
Some lessons that you can't study for. There's lessons that you just have to live. And sometimes through success and sometimes also through adversity. But once you learn those lessons, all you want to do is grab them and run and prove it. And so let me tell you, I am ready to run and prove it. Run like hell. And I'm a little older, maybe a little more chrome, and hopefully a little bit wiser. And but I'm also incredibly grateful for all of that has led to my feet being here.
No players obviously in attendance for Dan Quinn's press conference, but if anyone has listened to anything he said during that press conference, I think they're all ready to start running through a brick wall for this guy. Obviously what he did down in Dallas, and you hear people like Micah Parsons talking about how great of a coach he was. Every stop he had, everyone had good things to say about not just the person, but the coach, Dan Quinn. We're going to have plenty more coverage, obviously, in the 5 o'clock, in the 6 o'clock, in the 7 o'clock, all the way up until 11 o'clock on game night, so you're going to want to stay here. But for now, we're going to send it back to the studio live here in Ashburn at Commanders Park. Jake Rom, DC News Now.
Thank you, Jake. And, leading up to this announcement, we talked to a lot of people that have played for Coach Quinn, that have coached with him, all good things to say on that end. And today we got to hear from owner Josh Harris, general manager Adam Peters, and it was the echoing of that. And that whole dynamic of the owner, the GM, the head coach working together, they're excited for that. And if you remember the dysfunction with Dan Snyder, this is hopefully going to turn a new leaf for this franchise.
You know, we always talk about talent. It's not like Coach Quinn is starting from zero. There's some talent, especially on that offensive side of the ball. What do you think the need is right now with the draft and free agency? They're going to have a lot of cap space, as you know. Put on your GM hat.
Well, they're lucky that I'm not the GM and they have Adam Peters in there. But you look at the defense, he did mention John Allen and Deron Payne on that side of the ball. The receivers, he specifically did mention Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel. They have talent there. His quarterback, that's the key. They didn't say it up front because they're still figuring that out, but second pick in the draft could be Caleb Williams, the DC native. He could go first. Maybe they'll trade up. We'll see, but they got to get that quarterback.
All right, Alex, thanks so much. Looking forward to what's next for the Commanders. All right, switching gears now. It's been a really nice day, a really nice weekend. Live look outside at Roslyn here at 4:06. Let's turn over now to meteorologist Damon Matson for a first look at our forecast here.
Yeah, hey guys, it indeed was just a downright beautiful day out there. But we needed to warm up first because we've had such a clear sky carried over from this past weekend. Well, those temperatures, they tumbled down, and we started out this morning in the 20s, right around freezing in the DC metro. So many of us had to deal with some frost to kick off the day. But once that sun really was able to have its effect on our weather conditions, we warmed up nicely from there. And how about it, topping out just about an hour ago in DC around 52 degrees. We saw more of those 50s across northern Virginia, a few 40s hanging on across the Shenandoah Valley, but comfortable given that it is early February. And look at that, the satellite and radar picture has not changed much. It continues to stay extremely clear and extremely quiet, as we are not going to have any interruption to this clear sky over the next several hours. So enjoy the rest of your evening here, folks. It's going to remain comfortable, but once that sun does set between 5 to 6 p.m., the temperatures will drop down quickly. It is going to turn chilly with readings back into the 30s by the 10 to 11 o'clock hour. So does that mean we are going to wake up to another round of widespread frost tomorrow morning? And is there going to be a warm-up on the way for later this week? We'll have a full look at your forecast coming up here in just a bit.
All right, Damon, thank you. Mike Gill, a former housing policy executive who also served on the D.C. Board of Elections, has died. Gill was shot during a carjacking spree last Monday. The carjacking happened on K Street in Northwest, and police say the suspect, 28-year-old Artel Cunningham, was trying to steal cars across the district in Prince George's County before he was shot and killed during a standoff with police. Gill was one of the two carjacking victims that died as a result of the alleged crime spree. The other victim was identified as Alberto Vasquez Jr. Gill's wife released a statement following his death. It says, in part, his sudden departure has left a void in our lives that can never be filled. In this time of grief, we're grateful for the outpouring of love and support from family, friends, and the community.
Well, turning now to Maryland, it's a new era for Montgomery County Schools starting this week. The Board of Education is expected to name its interim superintendent tomorrow.
And this comes as former superintendent Dr. Monifa McKnight stepped away from her post this past Friday after a mutual agreement with the County Board of Education.
Our Randy Bass is joining us live from FCPS's headquarters now with the latest on what's next for the school system. Good afternoon, Randy.
Yeah, good afternoon, Mark and Elisa. A lot expected to happen here, even in just the next 24 hours. The school board expected to meet here publicly for the first time since this all went down on Friday. They're expected to name a new interim superintendent. We now know her name, Dr. Monique Felder. The school system released a statement this afternoon explaining a little bit more about her background. Felder previously served as superintendent for Orange County Public Schools in North Carolina. Most recently, though, MCPS says she's been spending time mentoring principals and assistant principals in the state of New Jersey and working with other superintendents down in North Carolina. This Thursday, though, the Montgomery County Council is slated to hold a public discussion on the county's Inspector General report, pointing to long-time issues with the Montgomery County school system's handling of employee complaints. We caught up with the council president this morning. He says the next steps are about finding solutions, ensuring accountability and transparency.
The Inspector General report suggests that there are a number of issues that were previously reported, that were identified, that have not been fixed, that corrective actions were not taken. That's what we should be focused on. Why is it that issues that get addressed are not fixed? What are the cultural challenges that allowed for anonymous complaints not to be investigated to the extent that they should?
Yeah, again, the Board of Education expected to meet here tomorrow morning at MCPS headquarters in Rockville. The closed session is expected to get underway right at 9 o'clock in the morning. Later on in the morning at 11, that session is expected to open up to the public, where they're expected to take that vote and appoint Dr. Monique Felter as interim superintendent of schools. Mark.
Randy, what else do we expect to hear from the board members at the meeting tomorrow?
Yeah, they've been pretty tight-lipped about this whole situation. On Friday, when all of this first happened and Dr. Monifa McKnight stepped down from her position, we tried to question those board members ourselves. They pointed us back to a written statement that they had released that day. They did tell us, though, that they will have more to say in the coming days. And as we understand right now, we will have a chance to ask more questions tomorrow and may even get a chance to speak with the interim superintendent herself. Live in Rockville, I'm Randy Bass, DC News Now.
Randy, thank you. Right now, we're also hearing from parents of Montgomery County Public School students tonight regarding Dr. McKnight's decision to step down last Friday. Some parents saying the turmoil they've seen from MCPS leadership over the last year and the lack of what they say is transparency there received from the Board of Education doesn't give them confidence that they'll select a suitable replacement for McKnight. One parent says above all else, he would like the next superintendent to be an accountable leader who puts students' education first.
The other big thing is a focus on like performance and education and not like the sideshows, because I mean this whole thing has completely distracted all of the issues like reading, writing, you know, which finally are getting a little better since the pandemic, but like that's where the focus should be.
The Montgomery County Board of Education will have a meeting tomorrow starting at 11 a.m. and there will be a public comments period at the beginning of that meeting.
Well, good news and bad news for Metro riders. Back in December, Metro leaders said WMATA might need to close 10 stations and cut thousands of jobs due to a budget shortfall. Well, new fiscal year 2025 proposed budget unveiled today avoids that catastrophe, keeping stations open, bus routes running, and train service moving. But for riders, it's going to cost you. Fares will increase 12.5%, and fares are based on distance traveled. So the least expensive trip will go from costing $2 to $2.25. The most expensive trip will go up $6.75.